Day after Christmas Day edition of PFT PM. 3 games that on paper didn't look like they would be that good, but we know how it works when it comes to professional football, when it's on TV or when it's only on streaming. People will congregate, especially on a holiday. The numbers are going to be very interesting, especially because they had 5 NBA games. All of them were televised by 3-letter over-the-air ABC, with some of them simulcast on ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN whatever. But all 3 games played by the NFL on Christmas Day this year were streaming only, and none of them had both teams vying for playoff position. The first one had neither. And we're going to talk about each of the 3 games, plus one of the other big issues in the NFL. I do have to share one observation first. I have to tell on myself. This is one of the misadventures of preparing for Christmas dinner. And I'd gotten very cocky about the whole turkey cooking thing, or cooking turkey thing, whichever way you want to say it. We had inherited the task of preparing the turkeys for the major holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. We did it a couple of years ago. And I remember thinking at first, like, this is a big deal. Like, we're led to believe that cooking a turkey is some magical, mystical, time-consuming, get up at 5 a.m. type of a thing. And after we did it once, it's like, it's really not that difficult. The hardest part is like getting the turkey ready, which isn't all that hard. It's just kind of gross. The stuff you got to dig out of the crevices of the turkey, not pleasant. And I fall back to my high school job at Kentucky Fried Chicken to make it easier to manipulate the dead poultry. But one thing I learned the hard way on this Christmas, and it happened when the turkey was removed from the roaster and I began the process of carving it, and I was like hitting bone. And then when I cut into the meat, it's like, is this not cooked? And then I realized that the turkey had been cooked upside down. And the best part of it, it was better that way, because gravity gets involved. The juices flow down from the dark meat into the white meat. The white meat was incredible. So, pro tip, accidentally cook your turkey upside down. There's a chance it's going to turn out even better. The turnout at the games yesterday, better than I would have expected. Now, look, Northwest Stadium, whatever they call the worst venue currently in the NFL, where the Commanders are still going to play for another few years, you could see that there were plenty of empty seats, but still not as empty as I thought it would be for a completely meaningless game. In Minnesota, full house. Kansas City, I was impressed. Now, the weather cooperated, and also the possibility that Travis Kelce's last home game, that may have had something to do with it. But loud for a team that was 6-9 entering the game with a third-string quarterback. I was impressed with the showing in all 3 stadiums yesterday. And I have a feeling at the end of the day that the ratings, when they come out, will reflect that football is king, even when the football gods have offered up some unkingly games for us to consume. You know, I think it was a couple of years ago, Broncos-Rams had a game late in the season on Christmas, 3 years ago maybe, and both teams were done, and it still did extremely well on CBS in that late afternoon window. So I sense, I don't know that the 24.3 million streaming record from last year's Ravens-Texans game is in doubt, but remember, that new way they came up with to measure audiences pumps up all the numbers by about 10%, because it does a better job of capturing out-of-home viewing. Well, there's no day like Christmas and Thanksgiving to have out-of-home viewing, and remember how big the Thanksgiving numbers were. A couple of other general observations. I do agree with Charles Barkley's take that the NFL, and the quote was this, and I always have a hard time. I'm more prepared for these when I'm reviewing games than I am. Like with PFT Live, I just sit down and have a conversation, and there's some notes to guide us. But I actually make notes on these cards that I steal from NBC, but it's NBC business, so what the hell. He said, we used to have this day to ourselves, but Roger Goodell and them pigs at the NFL, they want to hog They want to hog every day of the week now. And, got greedy. That's what it is. Them pigs at the NFL got greedy and want to hog every day of the week now. I have a hard time reading my own writing. But they didn't get greedy. They always were greedy. They just finally realized they could just take Christmas away from the NBA. I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. I'm surprised they waited until this decade to say, wait a minute. You got a lot of people kind of hanging around doing nothing. They got TVs. We got a product that plays great on TV. Let's play on Christmas. And hell, I remember a couple of years ago, they said, no way, no how. If Christmas is on Tuesday or Wednesday, we're not going to play games. And then they realized how much money they would make. And they played 2 games last year when Christmas was on Wednesday. And I suspect every day of the week now, whenever Christmas lands, there will be 3, just like there were on Thursday. It's easier on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday is where it's a challenge. I still think they'll find a way to do it because there's too much money to be made. There are too many rating points to be generated. And I get what Charles Barkley is saying, but the NBA didn't own Christmas any more than the NFL did. The NFL just didn't pay attention to it. And now that the NFL has, here we go. And yeah, newsflash, the NFL is greedy. What a shock. Football is family. No, football is business, but they say football is family because it's good for business. It's all about money. It's all about making as much of it as possible. And one of the ways to do that is to get as many people as possible to watch the games. I do have constructive criticism for Netflix. Why are you doing in-game interviews of former players? What was that? Did anybody like that? And that's the thing. I don't really need to pounce on Netflix for doing this because everyone is. This isn't the Manning cast. This isn't garbage time of it is a meaningless late season game, but it's a game. It's a game that people want to watch. And it's so distracting when you're watching the game and the conversation has nothing to do with the game. And it was forced into both of the Netflix games. They had Emmitt Smith in the first half of the early game, Clinton Portis in the second half. They had Barry Sanders in the first half of the late game, and I'm told Chris Carter in the second half, but I was feeling pretty good. I declared to the room, hey, you know what? I'm not going to pass out today after having that big meal. And 5 minutes later, I rested my head back on the chair and out I was. But I'm told Chris Carter, I missed it, but Chris Carter was involved in the second half. You don't need to do it. It takes away from the game. What was the purpose of it? Why are we doing this? I don't get it. No disrespect to the guys involved. And then it was crappy Zoom connections that were freezing up from time to time. I don't get it. It was ridiculous. And again, as I say that after I try to back away from, the full-blown suplex pile driver, but it really was misguided. And is that a product of a streamer that only wants to do a couple of games per year? Surely they have some expertise that's been involved in the production of these games to stand up and say, no, hang on, Mr. or Ms. Netflix exec, we don't think it would be a good idea to have interviews during the game. You want to do an alternate feed, and we'll do legends of the Cowboys and Commanders and Lions and Vikings? Fine. We still have to have a clean, traditional broadcast because you don't realize how much you rely on that narration, that real-time narration of what's happening until it's not there. Once it's gone, or once even worse, it's being replaced with something that's irrelevant. Well, it's relevant, but it's not relevant to what's happening. It's a major distraction. It takes away from the game. Netflix next year, don't do it. Anyone else out there, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And it's also, it felt kind of hokey and contrived, like somebody had the bright idea. Let's ask each one of these guys why football means so much to them. You know what? People who are watching the game don't care. I don't care how much football means to Clinton Portis, Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, or Chris Carter. I don't care how involved they are in football now. I care about watching the game that's going on right now. Okay, let me see if I have anything else. It really would it really would help if I could read my damn handwriting. I mean, I wrote these things within the past 12 hours. Oh, what was the deal with the steaks? Like, I understand the turducken. It's part of the Thanksgiving tradition, but I don't think steak and Christmas, I'd be all for it. Hey, I'd rather have tomahawk steaks than turkey 4 weeks after I had turkey. Maybe they're trying to rewire our Christmas traditions, but there's nothing about steak that says Christmas, and there's nothing about Christmas that says steak, at least not to me. But Netflix, good luck. Maybe over time, the tomahawk ribeye will become the new thing to eat on Christmas Day. All right, let's start with, and I'm going to work backward. Let's start with Broncos Chiefs. God, I mean, I don't know what this is. I don't know why. I remember most of this. So the Broncos beat the Chiefs 20-13, and it was a much closer game than anyone could have expected. Sean Payton said after the game that what the Chiefs did, they played a soft zone and tried to shorten the game. The kind of stuff that we used to hear defenses facing the Chiefs would try to do. Shorten the game, force the Chiefs offense to earn every blade of grass. Now, the Chiefs defense, they're trying to win these games with a less than offense. They didn't want to get burned. They didn't want to give the Broncos short possessions where they score touchdowns. They wanted to keep it close. And it worked. It worked. Even though the Broncos outgained them 303 yards to 189, it was 13-13 until very late in the game. And the Chiefs had 3 scoring drives, all of which were short. 35 yards for a touchdown after the lone interception of the game. Nick Bolton picked off Bo Nix. There was a 28-yard drive, 27 yards of which came on penalties that gave the Chiefs a field goal. And then the other field goal drive was a mere 16-yard effort to make it 13-13 going into that final 2 minutes of the game. And something else Peyton talked about afterward, because 4th and 2 from the Kansas City 9 with 2 minutes left. Broncos had plenty of time to think about it. They had the full 2-minute warning. Amazon Analytics, Next Gen Stats, whatever it is, said kick the field goal. Kick the field goal. Usually, and now it's possible ESPN Analytics would have said go, because it always says go. But it was 4th and 2, maybe a little less than 2. The Broncos were lining up as if they were going to go for it. Sean Payton said they were never going to go for it. And I don't know how much of that is factored into the overall analytics exercise. They ultimately didn't snap the ball, but they got a first down. And they have a play that they called Harrisburg. And Peyton was explaining last night, it was a formation they'd never used before. It's called a no-brainer freeze, where no one is going to move. And the whole idea is to get the defense to jump into the neutral zone. And Quinn Miners did a phony set hut after Bo Nix, and you can see Bo Nix lift his leg up the way Peyton Manning, close enough. Peyton Manning used to do, lift up the leg and put it down. Right after that, Miners yells a dummy set hut, and Chris Jones falls into the neutral zone, and that's that. 4th and 2 becomes 1st and goal. A few plays later, nice little rollout from Bo Nix, finds R.J. Harvey in the back of the end zone, 20-13. And hey, to their credit, with Chris Oladukin, they get down the field, long drive, get to 4th and 8. I didn't love the throw into the end zone. I thought they were just going to throw to Travis Kelce on every single play of the final drive. And it looked like there may have been a window underneath. And on 3rd and 8, I'm glad they finally showed a replay after the 4th down play, because real time from the angle that was on the broadcast, it's like, was the defender laying on his back as the ball went by? And the replay showed that he wasn't. So there wasn't a missed DPI there, but there was a missed connection to Hollywood Brown in that end of the game. So 20-13, the Kansas City Chiefs win. And said Kelce after the game, I'll let that be a decision I make with my family, friends, the Chiefs organization when the time comes. Obviously, the speculation, it was his last game at Arrowhead Stadium, as he has one game left before he ends his career. He lingered on the field for a little while afterward, taking it all in. He took it all in a little extra during pregame warmups. And this is all a matter of what's in the eye of the beholder. I heard during the broadcast, they thought he looked a little extra emotional after the national anthem. I fully expect him to retire. I expected him to retire after the Super Bowl. I think if they'd won the Super Bowl, he would have retired. I think the frustration that comes from getting blown out and embarrassed and having that effort to win 3 in a row come to a stunning halt. The way he talked about it just a few days later on the New Heights podcast, I thought this is a guy who is going to retire, and something convinced him to give it one more shot. What coming out of this 6-10 season so far would convince him to give it one more shot with a goal of leaving with a Super Bowl trophy under his arm? They all want it. Why wouldn't you want it? I would want that. The Hollywood ending, walk off into the sunset. Not many guys get to do it. Now, maybe he'd like to come back for one more year and be part of the effort to rebuild, to get back to the playoffs. Then you just want to get to the playoffs. That's the victory. You don't have to win the Super Bowl. That's just gravy on top of it. Let's just get to the playoffs and I'll walk away after that. But I think he's probably going to retire. I don't know. The way he's talking, it just feels like that's what's going to happen. And if he does come back, he mentioned he has to talk to the Chiefs organization. Yes, he does. He's going to be a free agent. He can go anywhere he wants. I don't get the impression he will, not the way he talks about the Chiefs. And if the Browns were good right now, he's from Cleveland. I could see maybe him trying to finish up there with his hometown team. I think he I think he pleaded with the Browns to draft him way back when. I think he really wanted to play for the Browns, but I can't see him playing for anyone other than the Chiefs, but I don't think he's going to play at all next year. The other thing, too, we've learned, whether it was Brett Favre, Tom Brady in past years, or Brandon Graham, and most recently Phillip Rivers, a retirement decision is not irrevocable. He could be back at some point during a season, if and when the need arises, and if and when he still feels the itch to suit up and play. Lions-Vikings, 23-10 with 6 turnovers by the Detroit Lions. Five of them from Jared Goff. This was one of the crazier outcomes that you would imagine. The Vikings had 51 passing yards, and they lost 48 yards on 7 sacks. 3 net passing yards. According to the Associated Press, there have only been 5 times in the Super Bowl era that someone has won by 10 or more points and had fewer than 10 passing yards. And it hadn't happened since 1978. And think about how the rules have changed to make it more conducive to passing. You know, some of those games, there was one in 69, 73, 74, whatever. Maybe the goal was to just run the ball in the 60s or 70s. Now it's a passing game. It's pass first, especially the Vikings offense. Of all the teams in the NFL, you would get pretty far down on the list before you guess the Vikings. Now, if you know that Max Brosmer is going to be the quarterback, you're more likely to guess them. But that was as bad as it could have been from an offensive performance for the Vikings. They had 76 yards of total offense until Jordan Addison got a reverse and went 65 yards to the house and really provided the dagger. The game was undecided until that play. That put the Vikings up, I think, 10. They added another 3. I think that's how it went. It made it 20-10. They added 3 points, and the Lions just couldn't do anything. But the performance from the offense, I said in the days before the game, it's a given they miss Ben Johnson. And I think the Dan Campbell attitude of, hey, whoever's going to go is going to go. I want guys who want to be here. And I think that's a good way to do business generally. But they had too much of a brain drain from the coaching staff. And they missed Ben Johnson. And the fact that Dan Campbell had to take over play calling in the Washington game, remember at first it was a secret. He had the cheaters on, and he's studying the play sheet. He's calling the plays, and he continued to call the plays. And yeah, it works against a team with a so-so defense. It doesn't work against a team with a great defense. And the Vikings, who swept the Lions this year, they provided the blueprint for handling the Lions offense without Ben Johnson. Pressure up the middle, force Jared Goff to move. Jared Goff is not one of the quarterbacks, and there aren't many who have this skill set that can make something happen when the play that's called goes sideways. 6 turnovers total and 5 from Goff. They were relentless yesterday. It was incredible. And it just makes me wonder what kind of changes are going to be necessary for the Detroit Lions. I said if they lose this one with their playoff lives on the line, it goes far deeper than not having Ben Johnson. There's something fundamentally wrong with the organization right now. To go from 15-2 to 8-8, something is off. And I don't know that one off season can fix it. You know, the window opens quickly and it closes quickly. I keep going back to Dan Campbell's quotes from after the loss to the 49ers in the 2023 NFC Championship. They blew the 17-point lead, went for it on fourth down when they shouldn't have. The field goal would have put them back up by 17. They went for it. They didn't get it. They're up 14. That was a B12 shot for the 49ers. If you saw the receiver series on Netflix, it was clear. It was clear. One scene, Amon-Ra St. Brown's family in the stands basically saying, what the hell are they doing going for it there? And the next scene, Deebo Samuel on the 49ers sideline, because both players were among the subjects of the receiver series. You could see how it lifted the 49ers to get that opportunity to wipe out that 14-point deficit and win the game. And they did. And Campbell said to reporters, I just told the guys this may have been our only shot. And that was jarring when he said it. And he tried to walk it back the next day. But he was right. It was their only shot. If they get back to the brink of the Super Bowl next year, it will be with a drastically different roster than what they had in 2023. And do you look at the Lions now and think they're closer or farther away from finishing the job that they started in 23, tried to continue in 24 until their divisional round upset loss at home to the Commanders? I just feel like they have a long way to go. And I want to choose my words carefully here, but because I'm not trying to make this into a story, but I'm also trying to give you an honest assessment of what I saw yesterday when I wasn't sleeping. I was reminded of the Jared Goff that the Rams gave up an extra first-round pick to get rid of. It was Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford, with the Rams giving the Lions 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick. And when that trade went down 5 years ago next month, a GM with another team said, look, here's what happened. It was a 1 and a 3 for Stafford, and the Rams threw in another first-round pick to get the Goff contract off the books. That Jared Goff, the one that Sean McVay wanted to move on from, that guy still rears his head from time to time. 5 turnovers yesterday. The way his contract's structured, it's not going to be a question this offseason, but I think what's going to happen for 26, we got to see more of the Jared Goff whose name was chanted zealously and loudly by Lions fans, even on the road. We got to see more of that guy. If we see too much of the guy that we saw yesterday, 27, I don't think Jared Goff's going to be the quarterback of the Lions. Not 26, it's fine. 2027, if we see the guy we saw yesterday on a regular basis, I mean, that's not even controversial. That's not a hot take. If the guy who coughed up the ball 5 times makes regular appearances in 2026, there's no way in hell he's going to be the quarterback of the team in 27. Hell, if that guy shows up regularly and isn't benched next year, Dan Campbell may not be the coach in 2027. I'm not trying to start anything there either. But 8-8 after 15-2. It's better to have low expectations that you exceed than high expectations that you fail to meet. And the bar was high for the Lions. And man, they had their shot. This may have been our only shot. Dan Campbell may have been absolutely right. The Vikings trying to build something, trying to have some carryover. In past years, it meant more because the teams didn't change as much as they do now. This roster is going to be very different in 2026. How much of 4 straight wins when they were left for dead, when it was as low tide as it's ever been for the Vikings, blowout losses to the Chargers, shut out by the Seahawks. It was an ugly, nasty mess. And then one game at a time, immediately after the 26-0 loss, I believe. Some of that is just kind of wiped out of my brain by choice, but they started winning, and they won one after another, beat the Commanders, beat the Cowboys, beat the Giants. Now they beat the Lions in a game the Lions had to have. I think there's an enthusiasm, a reinvigoration in the franchise. And I think and I said this before, whoever it was that decided they didn't need to have a veteran presence at quarterback to be the presumed starter this year, or at a minimum compete with J.J. McCarthy, Whoever made that decision needs to have some kind of accountability, whatever it may be. Not necessarily fired, but when someone makes a really bad decision, you make a really bad decision by continuing to listen to that person in the future. And I don't know who made the decision. I don't know. But I know from dealing with people who were dealing with the Vikings in March, there was a sense of confusion as to who's making these decisions. And this is one of the realities of having ownership that isn't in the building every day. And the guy that they replaced Kevin Warren with, because remember, Kevin Warren was basically the surrogate owner. He was the guy who was there every day before he became the Big Ten commissioner. Now he's the president and CEO of the Bears. But the guy who replaced him, like, I have to look up who it is. Like, this guy keeps such a low profile. I don't know how involved he is in any of this stuff. And I think the Wilfs stay involved remotely, but they're not there all the time. I'd love to know, within that power structure, within that organization, between GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, Coach Kevin O'Connell, Rob Brzezinski, who's still floating around negotiating contracts, like, how did this play out? Where we got a team that went 14-3, Super Bowl ready potentially. We got a question at the most important position on the field. What are we doing with Sam Darnold? What are we doing with Daniel Jones? Oh, Aaron Rodgers wants to play here. We're going to say no, no, no. And we're going to put out the unproven guy who missed all of his rookie season because he got a knee injury in the only preseason game he played. Let's go. Let's do this. I suspect that there were conflicting voices. That's all I'm saying. And I think part of the obligation of ownership this offseason is to recreate that moment and figure out who was right and figure out who was wrong. And as we go forward and try to figure out what we're going to do, hey, maybe the person who ended up being right, person or persons, who ended up being right about the quarterback situation should have a little more say going forward. And maybe the person or persons who were wrong about it. I'm not saying they get fired. I'm just saying, you always got to decide who you're going to listen to in an organization. Whoever was saying we need to have Darnold or Jones or Rodgers, maybe that person or persons should be listened to more moving forward. And whoever was saying, we're good with the unproven guy who got a knee injury that knocked him out for the whole year, let's go do this, maybe they should have a little less sway going forward. Speaking of going forward, Brian Flores, not under contract for next year. That surprised me. Something Devin McCourty mentioned recently, and I poked around a little bit. It's accurate. Brian Flores' contract expires after next week. Now, one person I spoke to said he'll be back. They'll do everything they can to bring him back. Well, okay, bring him back now. If you're ever going to bring him back now. Because once the coaching carousel starts to spin, once these coaching candidates begin to do their interviews, this is how the game goes. They want to go in there and say, here's who I'll deliver. And if there's an incoming coach who can deliver Brian Flores as defensive coordinator, that person's more likely to get the job. So you can't drag your feet with Flores if you're the Vikings. You can't do it. You got to get this done. Because once we get into the first week of the playoffs, once the permissions start going out to interview the various assistant coaches, once those interviews start happening, one of those candidates is going to show up and say, I can deliver Brian Flores. Oh, tell me more. Now, Brian Flores, in the opinion of many, should be a viable candidate to be a head coach. And I agree with that, especially after the performance we saw yesterday. Perfect time for him to have that. But you know what? Last year there was buzz. End of the day, nothing happened. And the problem for Flores, and look, this is the risk he took when nearly 4 years ago he decided to sue the NFL and multiple specific teams for racial discrimination. And then later the Texans got added to the party for retaliating against him, for not giving him a fair shake as they decided who they were going to hire as head coach, just, checking the box and playing along, but not being serious about considering Brian Flores because he had dared to sue Big Shield. Somebody asked me recently, what about Flores to the Giants? Well, he sued them. And this is where it gets weird. The average person, and I see this pushback all the time on Twitter. Now, I know Twitter's not a real place, and I know most of the people there, not most, half I don't know. Most of the ones I interact with, there's a lot of vitriol. There's a very low appreciation of what the law requires. But the reaction is, well, why would the Giants hire Flores? He sued them. Why would any employer hire someone who sued them? Well, because the law makes it clear you can't retaliate against people who have exercised their legal rights against you. That's not how the world works. Yeah, there may be an inclination to not want to do business with that person because that person dared to sue us, but it's not some frivolous case. Hell, Troy Vincent said either not long before or not long after the case was filed that they do have an issue when it comes to the representation of black coaches in the NFL. It's a long-standing issue. We all know about it. It was just a matter of time before somebody did something about it, and that case is still pending against the NFL, the Giants, the Dolphins, the Broncos, and the Texans. So, look, is it wrong for the Giants to consider the lawsuit when they're putting together their list of coaching candidates? Yes, it's wrong. And maybe they give him a perfunctory interview. Maybe they check the box. The reality is, when the supply of qualified candidates so far outweighs the demand, and I know the supply may be less this year than usual, but work with me on this. It's always easy to pivot away from someone you don't want. In the NFL head coaching profession, if there's someone you just don't want, John Gruden, Brian Flores, whoever, for whatever reason, right, wrong, or otherwise, there's always a way to stick handle toward the person you do want. And we see that more often than not. It's not about avoiding the one you don't want. It's about finding your way to the one you do want. There aren't so many obvious candidates out there that you can't get the one you want, but also there's so many people who want those jobs that it's easy to move around the ones you don't. If that makes any sense, I'm not quite sure it does, but my point is this. I don't think Brian Flores is going to be the head coach of the Giants. I'll be surprised, very surprised. And I'll wonder whether or not there's some sort of backroom dealing that even though they can't require him to dismiss his lawsuit if he gets another head coaching job, they can't do that. But if they get an off-the-record wink nod, hey, we'd love to hire you, but we're paying lawyers to, that money we're spending on the lawyers could just go directly to you. If there's just a way, no suggestions, no requests, if there was just a way, they wouldn't have to deal with that lawsuit. And then they take the leap of faith, they hire him, and the lawsuit gets settled for some reasonable amount. I think you have to settle it for a reasonable amount. You can't just dismiss it. That would look too fishy, but that's a way to make it happen. I doubt it. Because, the multi-billionaires who are very used to getting what they want and not being questioned by anyone, they resent being sued. They resent it. It's us against them. That's football. It's us against them. And Brian Flores is one of them who has sued us. We don't like that. We don't want that. So I think he'll be a defensive coordinator next year for the Vikings or someone else. And I think with each passing minute that the Vikings don't give him a new contract, the chances of him leaving go up. I think that's it from Vikings Lions. I will say this, though. I got some of the Vikings fans triggered because something the Vikings posted on social media after the game pressed one of my buttons. The perfunctory tweet from a team that no one expected to win, rubbing it in the faces, not of the team they beat, but in the faces of the people who, as part of their job duties, they pick the outcomes of games. Hey, Vikings, there's no reason anyone should have thought you were going to win the game. Enjoy the fact that you won the game. You don't need to drag the NFL.com writers, all of whom said they thought the Lions would win. Their employer expected them to make a pick. How could anyone have reasonably expected to see the Vikings win that game with Max Brosmer as the starting quarterback and J.J. McCarthy out and the Lions playing for something and the Vikings playing for nothing? And these folks are just doing their jobs. They're not gratuitously injecting themselves into the conversation. It's part of what the NFL wants. They want to start the conversation. They want to have their people make picks. And then one of their teams turns around and drags the NFL.com writers who make their picks for getting it wrong. That always drives me nuts. Like, how dare you make an assessment of this game based upon how we've performed this year? We've been bad. We've been good kind of lately, but, beating lesser teams. These are the Lions playing for a playoff spot. Did anybody pick the Vikings? So that irks me when that happens. And I wasn't even part of it. They could have dragged me. Of course I picked the Lions. I grew up a Vikings fan. I got a bunch of, everything I got for Christmas has a Vikings logo on it somewhere this year, even in a bad year. It's too late. It's what drew me to the sport in 1973. I can't help it. But I'm realistic about it. I didn't expect them to win yesterday. So anyway, I don't know. The social media team doesn't speak for the team. I hear that all the time. It's like, well, then have better control over your social media people because they represent your team to the world. All right, enough of that. Cowboys Commanders, the last game I'll talk about. Last and definitely least, Cowboys beat the Commanders 30-23. They had a 21-3 lead and they tried to blow it. They tried to get Matt Eberflus fired in the locker room. I mean, he's clearly going to be fired after the last game. Jerry Jones, the owner of the team, has basically said it. The only question is, does it happen after week 18 or before? And if they had blown that lead, I guarantee you it would have happened. They gained 480 yards of total offense. I think Washington was somewhere in the 300s. 87 total plays for the Cowboys and 41 for the Commanders, and still it was a 7-point game. Josh Johnson performed admirably, third-string quarterback, 23 passes, 15 completions for, what is that number? God, 198 yards, 92.3 passer rating. Deebo Samuel playing like a guy who's trying to get a contract. See, that's the incentive. It's not just pride and paychecks. It's also the next deal. He's going to be a free agent. He played hard. Had 2 runs for 25 yards, 2 catches for 68. Knocked the guy's helmet off on one of those runs. He gets a head of steam going when he gets the ball in his hands. Somebody is going to pay him. Somebody's going to pay him. And I can see, the Eagles are always interested in any great player. Some think that the Eagles are going to move on from A.J. Brown. Why not replace A.J. Brown with Deebo Samuel? Assuming he still can bring it, and based on yesterday, he still can bring it. Bill Krosky-Merritt, he had 105 rushing yards, 72 of which on one play touchdown that happened. We didn't get the call of that touchdown. You know why we didn't get the call of that touchdown? Because Clinton Portis was starting to talk. And I think Clinton Portis was a little miffed that he got interrupted. Hey, you just brought me on and you're trying to cut me off. What are you doing? Oh, there's a football game going on. George Pickens continues to be an interesting story for the Cowboys. He was targeted 5 times yesterday, 4 catches for 78 yards. What are they going to do? Franchise tag? Long-term deal? They're not going to let him walk away in free agency. The problem is if they franchise tag him, they're stepping into another Michael Parsons mess because, George Pickens, represented by the same agent who represents Michael Parsons. I don't think the franchise tag is going to go over well with George Pickens. I don't think it is. But you know what? In recent weeks, his performance hasn't been at the level that would have gotten him a contract that starts with a 4, which is the current top of the market. He's going to have a hard time getting a contract that starts with a 3 because the franchise tag is going to start with a 2. And I think that's what the Cowboys are ultimately going to do. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if Pickens is going to object, ask to be traded. Will there be a team? I doubt that there'll be a team that would sign him to an offer sheet and give up 2 first-round picks if the Cowboys don't match it. There are just too many questions about Pickens when things don't go well. There are no questions when things go well. Too many questions about when things don't go well. All right, before I wrap, I want to get you up to speed on the situation involving the player the Steelers traded for and signed to replace Pickens, who was traded a couple of months later, a month or so later, whenever it was. I remember when DK Metcalf arrived in Pittsburgh. People were like, DK Metcalf and George Pickens. And you're like, no. They're trading Pickens because they just gave to Metcalf the contract they would have given to Pickens. And they have to justify the Metcalf contract in a year where Pickens is trying to earn his contract. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be dysfunction on top of dysfunction. They will trade George Pickens, and they did. So Metcalf got the 5 years, $150 million contract. Metcalf also got the 2-game suspension on Monday for the interaction with the fan, initiating contact with a fan, grabbing his shirt, yanking him down over the railing, and pushing up forcefully with a closed fist that opened and glanced, grazed at best. But still, it was an ugly situation. As I wrote at PFT, the league had no choice but to suspend him, and the commissioner had no choice but to uphold the suspension. Now, the commissioner delegated to former NFL coach Chris Palmer, but regardless, you don't get those delegations if you do something other than what you sense the person who made the delegation wants you to do. So, $555,555 lost by DK Metcalf by missing the next 2 games. There are other financial ramifications. I have seen many address this, and I believe that they are not entirely accurate as it relates to the second item. Let me address the first item, beyond the lost pay. There was a $30 million signing bonus given to Metcalf. That works out to an allocation of $6 million per year on the 5-year deal. The way the CBA works, if you commit a forfeitable breach, and this is one, a suspension of 2 games for conduct detrimental to the NFL is a forfeitable breach. Under the CBA, the team is authorized to recover 25% of the allocation of the signing bonus for that year. That's $1.5 million. We've seen no reporting as to whether or not the Steelers are going to seek $1.5 million back from DK Metcalf. They have every right to do it under the CBA, and I've reviewed the contract. The way the contract is written, they have the full rights available to them in the contract under the CBA. They can ask for $1.5 million back from DK Metcalf if they want to. Now, moving forward, he's got $25 million in fully guaranteed money for 2026 and a $20 million injury guarantee for 2027. There's a question as to whether those payments have already voided or whether the team needs to send a letter to Metcalf exercising their right to void them. It's an important distinction. If they're already voided, the Steelers can make their decision whenever they want about what they're going to do with Metcalf. If the money next year is already, the guarantee is already voided, they can release him. They can move on from him. If they just decide this guy's more trouble than he's worth, and hey, Mike Tomlin has come out in support of him, said he's been a great guy on the team. You know, I don't expect him to come out and air dirty laundry. That's not Tomlin's style. We always find out about the dirty laundry after the guy's gone or as they're setting up the move away from the guy. But if the guarantee is already voided, they don't have to do anything right now. They can bide their time. They can see how DK responds to this. They can see how he participates or not in the offseason program. Maybe he'll be there for every workout, bells on, with the right attitude, doing everything. It's a hell of a weapon that the Steelers have if the guarantee has voided. Because they have until week 1 of the 2026 regular season to move on from DK Metcalf without owing him the $25 million. Once he's on the roster week 1, they owe it as termination pay if they would cut it. So it gives them a lot of flexibility. And also, if the 2027 injury guarantee is gone, boy, that gives them something too. Because let's say he suffers a serious injury next year that would affect his availability in 2027. That's why you have an injury guarantee. You move the injury risk to the team. Well, now, if that guarantee is gone, the injury risk is on the player. Serious injury next year, Metcalf can't play in 2027. He doesn't get the $20 million injury guarantee. So my point is this. If I'm Metcalf's agent, and I saw the report from NFL Network that the Steelers have already reaffirmed their commitment to DK Metcalf. The comment was, the guarantee is voided, but the Steelers have reaffirmed their commitment. Okay, you know what? If the guarantees really have voided, and I still don't think they do unless there's a letter sent, a letter that maybe the Steelers don't want to send now because they're focused on keeping this guy, on board with the effort to win playoff games and maybe pursue a Super Bowl and the way they played against the Lions, maybe they can. But if I'm Metcalf's agent, I am getting it in writing that they've reaffirmed their commitment. I'm getting those guarantees reactivated. I'm getting a revision to his contract that makes it clear that even though the contract says the guarantees will be null and void in the event of a suspension for conduct detrimental to the NFL, among other things, there were several different ways you could void the guarantees. I want it in writing that the guarantees still exist. I don't want to play this game, this gotcha game, where if they cut Metcalf and say, hey, the guarantee is voided. No, I don't want to do that. That's one of the important things when you're practicing law. You have to identify the areas where your client could get screwed later, and you engineer into the current circumstances protection against getting screwed later, because you never know what's going to happen later. But you do know what you could do now to protect against the bad outcome later. I would do that right now. I would bring that issue to a head. I'd call Omar Khan and I'd say, hey, look, you're reaffirming your commitment to DK Metcalf. Let's put it in writing. Because as I've said time and again, verbal promises aren't worth the paper they aren't written on. And all of a sudden, if things go south between Metcalf and the Steelers, I don't know. Flick who? Get it in writing. Whoever it is that represents DK Metcalf, and I'd have to look it up. It's not one of the major firms. Get it in writing and protect your guy. If they've reaffirmed their commitment, you want that protection. Because the way the contract's written, the way the practice is usually done with the team affirmatively notifying of a void of the guarantees, there's just too much gray area. Make it black and white and get it in writing. One last thing as it relates to the Metcalf situation. At some point on Friday, the fan who was assaulted, and I'm sorry, I know it became a joke after Myles Garrett hit Mason Rudolph with his own helmet, and Adam Schefter tweeted assault, and my friends at Pardon My Take clowned him for it. It is an assault. Anytime you go up to anyone, even if you just poke them, in the chest, that's an assault. It's an assault and battery. It's an offensive touching that you're not welcoming. There could be a lawsuit over what DK Metcalf did to the fan. Now, he wasn't injured, so what would a jury give Ryan Kennedy, the fan who was assaulted by DK Metcalf, in a court of law? What would you give him? $5? Right? Absent some compelling evidence of PTSD or some psychological issue that I don't want to diminish, because these things can happen. People can have trauma that we don't obviously see. But the guy looked excited after it happened. He said that was the goal, or words to that effect. Here's where it becomes problematic. When Metcalf's camp started pushing the story on Monday morning that the fan had used a racial slur toward Metcalf and had said inappropriate things about Metcalf's mother, supposedly the C word, once that got out there, Chad Johnson put it out there, stating it as fact on the Nightcap podcast. Tom Pelissero put it out there, citing a source close to Metcalf, without mentioning that Ryan Kennedy had already told the Detroit Free Press, I just said his full name, Metcalf's full name. He didn't like having his full name being uttered. Ryan Kennedy was painted a certain way that's false. I think a defamation case against Metcalf, whoever it was, and it would start maybe as John Doe, and through the discovery process, we'd find out who it was that was the conduit between Metcalf and Chad Johnson, Metcalf and Tom Pelissero. The lawsuit goes against NFL Network. It goes against the Nightcap podcast. I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble. I'm just trying to, the trouble's already happened. I'm trying to sift through it. But I think what's going to happen, and for all I know, it's about 10:20 a.m. as I wrap this thing up today. I think they're planning to file a lawsuit, and I think the defamation claim will be part of it. There's too much that's been said in the statement that was issued by Kennedy's lawyers, in the notice of the press conference that's going to happen. You know, the allegation is that a lie has been told about what Ryan Kennedy said to DK Metcalf, that the aftermath has been harassment, threats, fear for the safety of Ryan Kennedy and his family, the kind of psychological trauma that does become a potential six-figure award if you can prove defamation. And remember, he may be in the process of becoming a public figure. At the time the thing was said that he claims was false, he's not a public figure. You don't have to prove malice. The bar's not high. All you have to prove is somebody said something false about me and it harmed me in some way. And then off you go. I think that's what's going to happen. I won't be surprised if the lawsuit's filed today, next week at the latest. It's all pointing in that direction. And it's going to be an interesting case study. Not only as it relates to a player initiating contact with a fan and the provocation that may or may not have justified it, but that effort after the fact to activate the spin cycle. Because what Metcalf's camp was trying to do, trying to work the media to get some support for something other than a suspension. They're trying to just get the word out there that what Metcalf did was justified because the things this guy said were awful. Well, you know what? And Aaron Rodgers, he and I disagree on a lot of things, but we agree on one thing. The stuff Aaron Rodgers said this week about Metcalf, about fans who think they buy a ticket, it's basically a blank check to say whatever you want. I've been there. I've been there on the field, walking off the field. And it's usually just you suck and I smile and wave. But, I've heard some things. You go to a game, you sit in the stands, you see people acting up. They have a few overpriced beers and they think they have a right to say whatever they want to say. And there is a code of conduct. And the NFL has said it's examining the situation and maybe they will take action against Ryan Kennedy. And the NFL, to the extent the NFL is going to be sued for defamation, they'd probably like it to be true that the guy said the things that their reporter reported he said. That's where it gets a little weird, gets a little awkward. But hey, I'll say this. If Ryan Kennedy crossed the line, where's the video? Where's the audio of him shouting a racial slur, of him using the C word in reference to DK Metcalf's mother? Where is it? Everybody's walking around with the cell phone device. We're all Big Brother if we want to be. We've seen different angles of the interaction. I haven't heard anything inappropriate. So this is something that the league, that media outlets, that players should learn a valuable lesson from, and fans as well. It would be nice if fans didn't act like jerks at games. It would be. Well, it's on the league. It's on the operators of the stadiums to ensure that the fans who do act that way are dealt with harshly and are ejected from the stadium and are banned from future stadium events. You have to expect it. You have to have a higher standard for what you won't tolerate in order to get the outcome you're looking for. But until that happens, you don't walk over and initiate contact with a fan. You don't do it. And you have an apparatus in place. It was borderline comical when Mike Tomlin was asked about whether or not the Steelers have a protocol that keeps players from approaching the fans. His first answer was a non-answer. And the follow-up was, so is it yes or no that you have a protocol? And he said, we certainly may. We certainly may. We certainly should. He didn't say that. He said, we certainly may. His attention's on the field. He assumes that they have a great security apparatus, but you know what? Either they don't or they do, and it failed miserably. Just watch those videos. DK Metcalf walks over unimpeded, unbothered. Nobody says a word to him as he walks over and reaches up and snatches the shirt of Ryan Kennedy. So other teams have it. Every team should have it. Every stadium has fans who will say outlandish stuff. And I don't know if irony is the right word here, but Seattle, I heard from a longtime employee of a team who's been to every stadium. Seattle has the fan who is the worst, vicious and mean, parked by the tunnel that the visiting team uses. That guy is over the top, the source said. I don't know who the guy is, but whoever the guy is, I bet they don't know who he is. But he's there every game, and he's always giving it to the opposing players. And you just have to have a hard shell about that. I mean, I assume plenty of outlandish things are said on the field to try to get under players' skin, to get them to crack, take a swing, 15 yards, get ejected. So whatever mode you slip into on the field to deal with all the horrible things that are said between the white lines, you got to keep that force field up when you're hearing it in the stands. And there's never, I don't care what they say, there's never an excuse for taking matters into your own hands. You go to security and you say, listen to what this guy's saying, get him out of here. That's what you do, and that's what DK Metcalf should have done. In the future, that's what all players should do. All right. That's it. That's all I had to say. I think I went a full hour today. Hey, no days off, right? Except when we take days off. We'll be back on Monday with no days off until we take off New Year's Day. But until then, you'll have PFT Live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll do the Picks podcast next week. Oh, and by the way, Saturday night, There is a football game. Peacock exclusive streaming. Don't complain. You already have Peacock. You got it last year for the streaming. You already have Netflix. You have all the. It's too late to complain about streaming. Streaming is taken over. You get to see the Ravens Packers on Peacock on Saturday night, and then Sunday Night Football, NBC, 49ers hosting the Bears in a massive game that is oozing with playoff implications from division championships all the way to the number 1 seed. We'll see that and more football this weekend, and we'll get back on Monday with PFT Live to break it all down. And also we'll be posting around the clock at profootballtalk.com. Have a great weekend. Happy holidays, and we'll talk to you real soon. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.